Good afternoon. I will call to order the January 25th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Magrino, Slack, Rockwell, and Vreeland. I should mention that Scott Vreeland is the newest member of our commission. He is the Park Board representative. Our first item of business is to approve the actions from the January 11th meeting. May I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Our next item of business is to sort through the agenda, determine which items, if any, will be discussed, which will be on the consent agenda, and which items will be continued. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. We'll start at the top of the agenda. Item number 1 is 510 Cedar Avenue South. A couple applications for a new building there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. Item 2 is the Sanctuary Covenant Church at 2018 through 2024 Aldrich Avenue North and 715 21st Avenue North. A couple of applications for a building addition there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? In that case, we will put that on consent. Item 3 is the DTE ATM variance at 510 and 640 South 4th Street. That's a variance to the enclosed building standards for an ATM. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 4 is Episcopal Commons at 1730 Clifton Place. Some applications there for a new mixed-use building. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Yes, we have a couple people, so we will discuss that item. Item 5 is the Target Center renovation at 600 First Avenue North, a site plan review for some building modifications there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. And then item 6 is the Moxie Uptown at 1121 West Lake Street and 3005 Emerson Avenue South. Several applications for a new hotel there. That item will be continued to the February 8th meeting. So if anyone was wishing to speak on that, that will be considered on February 8th. So our amended agenda is as follows. Items 1, 2, 3, and 5 will be on consent. We will discuss item 4, and item 6 will be continued to the February 8th meeting. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Yes, Commissioner Vreeland. There are not. That is on consent as it stands right now. No one wished to speak on that item. And okay, so that motion, did we vote on that? I lost track. Okay, yes. That motion carries then, so the agenda has been amended. At this time, may I have a motion to continue item 6 to the February 8th meeting? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we can move on to our Committee of the Whole consent agenda. Commissioner Slack, do you have an update?
Thank you, President Brown. At the January 14th, 2016 Committee of the Whole, we had 5 items for review and discussion. The first item was series of land sales, 2700 Aldrich Avenue North, 2803 Aldrich Avenue North, 3950 Bryant Avenue North, 2637 Emerson Avenue North, 3534 Fremont Avenue North, and 3515 Girard Avenue North. The second item was a public land sale for 3600 10th Avenue South. Third item was a public land sale for 2523 14th Avenue South. And the fourth item was a public land sale for 2441 16th Avenue South. The last item we saw was a presentation regarding the Southeast Minneapolis Industrial Area TIF plan and related plan modifications. The recommendation motion for all 5 of those items was to approve the staff report that the item was consistent with the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth.
All right, and I will take that as a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole consent agenda. May I have a second? And we have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. At this time, I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. That is items 1, 2, 3, and 5. Is there anyone wishing to speak on any of those items? 1, 2, 3, and 5. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our items for discussion, or our item for discussion. That is item 4, Episcopal Commons, and staff is Ms. Helene. Or actually, Ms. Dvorak.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a project for the property at 1730 Clifton Place. This is the Episcopal Homes development. Some of you may remember this was on our agenda last summer. It got withdrawn at staff's request, given some design changes. They recircled with their development team, and actually what you're seeing tonight is almost identical to what was going to be presented at the July 6th meeting last year. They went back to the drawing board and decided that what they had originally drawn was probably the best design for the site. We have eliminated one application that was a loading variance, because they have reduced the amount of office space in the building. So what you're seeing tonight is a mixed-use building with 64 dwelling units and approximately 5,700 square feet of office space. And that office space will be utilized by the church. That is just to the northwest of the site. Here, I can show you on the overhead. So this is the project site here, and then St. Mark's Episcopal Church is here. So they are the ones that will have office space. They're also the ones that will own the additional parking that's discussed in the parking variance in the staff report. So the applications before you tonight is a conditional use permit to increase the height of the building as it is in the shoreland overlay district from 2.5 stories, 35 feet to 4 stories, 59 feet, and that is to the uppermost height, which is to the top of the stair and elevator overruns on the building. There is a variance to increase the maximum number of parking spaces from 94 to 163. A variance to increase the amount of lot coverage from the maximum 70% to 75%. They have variances along Clifton Place from 15 down to 0, and then a variance along Groveland Avenue from 15 to 9, and then site plan review. Staff is recommending approval of all of the applications before you tonight. I think just to go through the project. So this is a diagram that the applicant put together that shows the furthest extent of any projection of the building to the property line. So I know you cannot read these numbers because they are small, but you get down to just about 9 feet there along Groveland, and then on Clifton Place you get down to 0 feet, and the 0 feet is really for walkways and staircases that are larger than what we allow for permitted obstructions. There is a transformer located in the front yard that we do have specific conditions on for that variance. And then here is the landscape plan, and I should say that the variance or the setbacks along that north and then the west property line where there are adjacent properties, those are being met. This is the landscaping plan for the project, and speaking to the variance for impervious surface, this area of the site, there is a parking garage. As you read in the report, there's a 16-foot grade change from one end of the site to the other, and to accommodate that parking garage is above ground. In some locations, otherwise you wouldn't be able to accommodate for that grade change. Here are the elevations of the building. And I think you can tell if you remember from last summer that the building is pretty similar in design. It's a brick building with stone on the top and stone accents around the entry plaza. We also do have some conditions of approval related to the retaining wall that is back here. At the highest extent, that retaining wall is approximately 16 feet. They are proposing vines that cascade over, which is something that we talked about at Committee of the Whole last summer. They are carrying that forward into their landscaping plan, and so you do see that, and we are just making that a condition of approval. The only other conditions that we are adding talk about the transformer. Again, that was located in that front yard just north of the garage door, or the entrance to the garage door. They are proposing to wrap it in those decorative screens or decorative wraps that you see on utility boxes on different corners throughout the city. We are recommending that they do that and that we do see the design of that wrap before it's applied. And then also looking for additional perennial screening or perennial grasses, to help screen that from both the north and south. I don't think they'll be able to screen it right along the sidewalk edge, although there is boulevard there. There is some concern from the applicant about if it had to come out that it would be damaged and they'd have to replace it. But in my opinion, I think the likelihood of it coming out in an emergency is probably slim to none. So those are the conditions of approval, and I can go into any of the other applications if any commissioners have questions.
Commissioner Kronberg.
Yeah, I just have a question about this retaining wall. Can you kind of walk us through when you're in the alley, or the private alley, I should say, what's that condition right along the alley? Because it looks like there's already terracing going on with that wall.
I think in the packet there are some additional renderings that show this, because this isn't all, it's not all retaining wall. So the extent of the retaining wall, it goes up and down, and they've cut the height of it to accommodate different landscaping sections. So this is an open fence on top. You can't see it. Oh, sorry. So let me see. So when you're coming,
let me ask the reason I'm asking this question. Is there an ability for someone who's in that alley to get into that space and hide or sleep or do something? Because it looks like on this rendering, as you go to the left, there's a very short wall where there's plantings, which looks like it's deep enough where someone could hang out there. Does that condition happen for very long?
That the wall is short? I'd have to. I'll ask the architect to maybe address the overall height, because I was looking more for the highest point, because that was the concern from Committee of the Whole, is that the wall was too tall. And so we discussed having, bringing it down to a more human scale with different plantings, and then having cascading vines come over it to soften the wall. So I don't think we discussed people jumping up into it, or at least I don't recall. So I guess we could ask the architect to talk about the overall height. Where it is shorter, there is the guardrail, as you could see here, and then this gets, there are staircases up into that green space in the back, and that's gated. And there are dwelling units right there overlooking that space. And then this is, so what they've done is they've jutted out the wall at this angle here. This is lower. And I'll try to look at the elevations, or maybe the architect could say how tall that part is. But then all of this is up at the plaza level for the residents. And I guess just to give you a different sense, this is looking at it from the north looking south. So as you can see, here's a door. So it does get shorter up here, but I'm not exactly sure what that height is right at that point.
Right. Commissioners, are there any further questions? Hillary, I have a question. We're often a little bit cautious about variances to the maximum amount of parking. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the parking requirement of the church next door. I understand they plan to use many of the spaces for that and just kind of justifying the need for that.
Sure. And it's not based on the parking requirement for the church.
Right.
Okay. So the dwelling units, there are 64 dwelling units, and between Episcopal homes and then the church, they've set a maximum number of spaces in the building for the residents at 1-to-1. So 64 is the maximum. So anything above and beyond that, we've said is excess parking. And the amount of office space in the building has that parking maximum of 29 spaces. So the 64 and the 29 is the 93, and then they have the 163. The neighborhood, the small area plan for this neighborhood does call for developers to provide public parking or additional parking for the neighborhood, depending, however a developer would want to price that, to provide that. So given that all of the parking is enclosed within the building and that it wouldn't look any different to anyone standing around the building if they met the parking requirement, if they exceeded it, and then coupled with the small area plan policies for providing additional parking for things such as church, events at the church that have hundreds of people coming to it, we felt that we could support the parking variance in this situation. And thank you, because we don't typically support maximum parking variances. In this case, a lot of the developments that have occurred have happened on parking lots in the neighborhood, and that has had kind of an effect on street parking in the neighborhood when there are large events at the different institutions.
All right. Commissioner Rockwell.
Sorry, clarifying question. So are the spaces in excess of 64 of the 64 spaces, are they going to be signed as public parking, or how will they be used when there's not a large event at the church? So if we're trying to make up for service parking lots disappearing in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. I would let the applicant answer that question. What I've been told is that the church will be using it at their discretion.
Okay, are there any further questions of staff? If there are none, I will open the public hearing, and I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first. You're here, and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Michael Pipkin. I work for the Episcopal Church in Minnesota. This is a planned venture between three entities. So you've got St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral that you've seen, the Episcopal Church in Minnesota, which owns the property now, and Episcopal Homes. You'd asked the question about parking. What we're proposing to do here is to continue use of the space for the office for the Bishop and Missioners for the Diocese of Minnesota, but to also continue to provide some additional parking to St. Mark's. So right now, about 60 parking spaces are used on Sunday, every Sunday for St. Mark's, and it's filled to capacity all the time. So when the offices are closed and there's extra space, and what we really hope to be able to have is St. Mark's to use that parking space for their capacity on a weekly basis. So it's not just special events or occasional time. When St. Mark's is not using it, as I understand, what they'd like to be able to do is to manage that lot for public use for a fee. So it will be open to neighbors, to the restaurant next door at 510 Groveland, to whoever might have need for off-street parking in the neighborhood, and it's our hope to be able to provide that service to them.
And I'm Jeffrey Schoenig with Cunningham Group, the architecture firm working on this project. And just to address the questions that were asked of the alley first. The alley is, when we went to the committee of the whole, we had a very tall alley profile along the back edge. We were asked to refine that. So we've dropped from, I think, 11'3" was the top of that wall. So we've tried to drop that height as much as we could along that back face and create more of a terrace up to the back side of the building. So I think at its lowest point, we're about 4 feet, 3 inches, something like that. Is it possible that somebody could climb in there? Yes, although I will say this will be a managed property by Episcopal Homes. So there will be some level of management there that would be also helpful, I think, in mitigating something like that. In general, we are inside of a master plan that is a little bit at odds with the way the zoning as stated is today. And at the time we started the conversation, not ratified. And so some of the setbacks we're asking for are actually really reflecting the master plan requests that we come out and approach the street, look at walk-up units and other sort of pedestrian scaled amenities along the Clifton Place face and the Groveland face. We tried to hold that back as far as we can and sort of maintain a nice balance of urban presence and not feel like we're a wall building along that street. So you'll see sort of a pedestrian scaled amenity along that face. The height was much taller when we started this. The density was much higher. We spent a fair bit of time with the neighborhood group. We spent a fair bit of time with the 510 folks, as well as the mansion owners to the north of the property. And through that, we've changed the building into what it is today, a much lower density building, a little lower height. So originally 6 stories, now we're looking at the 4-story in front of you. Materials and the palette that we've used are coming again from that master plan side where there's a call for sort of a reflection of what's in the community. And so really tried to take the master plan piece that was in place and put in place by the residents here and craft a building that really fits and nestles into the site well. And I think we're getting really, 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 really close. So anything else you can answer?
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Breland.
Say the view is not detrimental from the protected water. Have you any visual of that being true?
Yeah, Hillary asked me this earlier. We do have a drawing. I don't have it with me today. I'd be glad to provide it. We did a drawing when we were in the original concept of the building, which was the six-story building. In that diagram, we had very little of the building actually showing. And when we went to 4 stories, we're cutting about 20 feet from that view. So the view, we've got 3 or 4 different views that we can provide that would show that there's virtually no view of it.
I know the area well, and I don't think that it's a particularly a problem. But yeah, if we're going to make a decision without knowing what it looks like and talk about shoreline overlay, it would be nice to have that recorded in the process from my perspective.
I do have an image of it on my phone. I don't know if I can get it onto the.
Yeah, we can come back to it. Okay. We'll bring it up.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not an issue. I'm just curious to see what it actually looks like.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can, maybe if there are no further questions for the applicant, we can move on to some other speakers and maybe come back to that question momentarily. I think we have a few people here to speak on this item. Who would like, yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
So I'm Carl Bretsky. I'm a resident at 510 Groveland, and I'm here today to represent the board and all the residents at 510 Groveland. So we're thankful to the church for making some of the compromises they've made. We still have some objections. The 510 Groveland Association Board of Directors urges that the requested variance for reduced setback along Groveland Avenue for the Episcopal Homes project not be granted. Reducing the setback on this project will increase hazards to vehicular and pedestrian traffic by obstructing visibility, both for the 510 Groveland driveway, which I might add, it's not an alley, that's our driveway, as well as the intersection of Groveland Avenue and Clifton Avenue. The project borders the northeast corner of the intersection, and the intersection is heavily traveled by automobiles and pedestrians. These intersections have historically seen significantly high amount of traffic and traffic-related accidents. Furthermore, the addition of the 64 dwelling units and the additional office space will increase both vehicular and pedestrian traffic within the community, compounding the concerns regarding visual impediments with a reduced setback. I might add that the proposed building is designed specifically for seniors, and many of our residents are seniors as well. We thank the Planning Commission for their consideration and again implore that the requested variance for reduced setback along Groveland Avenue for the Episcopal Homes project not be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Who would like to go first? You go ahead. We can start over on this side. Well, why don't we take all of the testimony first, and we can have an opportunity to go back to that.
Thank you. Commissioners, thanks for having the public hearing today. My name is Douglas Kline, and I'm a resident of 510 Groveland. And I have two requests for the development, not related to the variances, and I've stated them before, but since we're back here today, I'm back here with my same comments today, dealing with sound pollution and light pollution. I just would like to ask the developer to mitigate or reduce the sound pollution that could be caused by the rooftop mechanicals and air conditioning units and compressors on the roof of this building, perhaps by installing units that are designed to be quieter or oversized units that will run quieter and less frequently. So that's the sound pollution component. The second component is light pollution. I just want to make sure that the developer considers in the completed project that the lighting, ambient lighting, decorative lighting, security lighting especially, be mitigated or reduced so that there's no nighttime overspill of illumination causing light pollution or distraction to nearby properties. So those are my two concerns, both regarding pollution, primarily the sound pollution on the roof and the light pollution on the that could come from the roof or the ground level, all levels really. So it's a rooftop sound pollution issue that I'm bringing forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the next speaker, please state your name and address.
Hello, I'm Jan Amaechi, and I'm the director of CLPC, Citizens for a Loring Park Community. Just to report for the record that the CLPC Board and Land Use Committee approved the concept of the development, and we just want to say how great it was to work with the developer and the Episcopal Church and the whole partnership. They had several meetings with the impacted community. They met with the neighborhood. They responded very quickly whenever we had questions. I will add, though, that we didn't get the specifics of the setback on Groveland until after our board motion. And so we would defer to the 510 Groveland board and encourage the developer to continue working with them. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? If there's no one, we can circle back to the applicant, and if you'd like to respond to anything and answer any further questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the photo if it's
So at the Episcopal Church in Minnesota, St. Mark's and Episcopal Homes, we're very proud of the partnership we put together here. We're proud of the way we've worked with our community and keeping with our own values as a church to be engaged in our community and to do the right things. I think that you'll understand looking at the site plans and understanding the grade variances and the craziness that is this corner of our little place there in Loring Park. Developing something in this particular space is pretty dang near impossible. What we have created here is really the best thing that I think you're going to see. It's not just the best thing from our perspective, but any developer who's going to come to this space is going to want something a lot taller, a lot more dense. And what we're planning to do here by putting in a retirement community that supports the church and engages in the local community is far and away better than I think putting in another high-rise like the view across the street. I want to say that in doing this, we have listened at 510 a number of times. We've visited with their board and with members of the community there and heard specifically their concerns about traffic on 510, traffic on Groveland Avenue, and have, in fact, eliminated a point of egress from the property right there at that same spot. If you were to look at satellite view or an aerial view of that spot today, there is an exit from our parking lot right next to the exit, their driveway exit, which creates a lot of problems. And what we're proposing to do as part of our parking plan is to eliminate all egress from the site on that point and have it come all the way out on Clifton Avenue. So we've eliminated a little bit of traffic congestion there. I understand that there are concerns about the setback and how close we're getting, but there's still a sizable bit of sidewalk that's there, some ample space for seeing the traffic, and now the elimination of a whole lane of traffic that's competing for exit onto Groveland Avenue. Really hope that you consider supporting all of these proposals. We're hoping that we get to build this and break ground as soon as we can. This is going to be an exciting thing for the neighborhood and for the church. Thanks.
Great, thank you. If there is no one else who is interested in speaking, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, are there any further questions, or would someone like to start us off with the motion? Commissioner Slack.
I have a question for staff. Were there any concerns from Public Works regarding sightlines or any other traffic-related issues?
No, there were not. So the building itself is pulled 9 feet back. There is a retaining wall that is up to the property line, probably no taller than 3 feet. I was just discussing with the architect that we could look at either pulling that retaining wall back or lowering it, depending on the situation right there. But it is sorry, I'm just going to try to find this elevation. So this is that situation. So the retaining wall, is at the property line, and then the building wall is 9 feet back. So we have 9 feet of space where we could cut that retaining wall down, I think. I'll defer to that. I'd want to have the architect look at the plans and make sure that we're not, cutting off a parking garage space or something for any underground parking. But I think we could reduce that height. But no, Public Works had no concerns. I mean, and as you know, site plan encourages buildings to be up to property lines. Obviously, we do have concerns for site triangles, but I think in this case, because the building has that 9-foot setback, that is adequate for sight lines. And the building is also 15 feet from that interior property line. So there is, it's not just 9 feet back and then all the way up to that interior property line. There is a greater triangle, if you want to say.
Okay, are there any other questions, or would someone like to start us off with a motion? Commissioner Slack.
I'd like to move staff recommendation for item A, conditional use permit to increase height of the building.
All right, we have a motion and a second for item A, the conditional use permit. Yeah, we can take a quick look at that if we have it to put on the overhead.
Correct. So this was the dash line shows sort of the location from the front of the Groveland office building, the bottom of the hill, looking up, and that's to propose 6-story building. Since that time, we've brought that height down significantly.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Is there any further discussion on that motion to approve the conditional use permit? If there is none, clerk, please call the roll.
Bender? Aye. Gagnon? Aye. Gissman?
Aye.
Cronford?
Aye.
Negrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Freeland?
Aye.
That's 8-0.
All right, and that motion carries. Next, we have 4 variances. Commissioner Slack.
I make a motion to approve staff recommendation for items B, C, D, and E, variance for maximum parking requirement, variance for maximum lot coverage, variance for front yard setback along Clifton, and then variance for front yard setback along Groveland.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And I'll just mention, since we had a number of people here to testify specifically on the setback variances, the OR zoning districts generally do envision a bit of a yard as opposed to the commercial districts where the buildings are typically brought up to the street. In this area, though, one of the findings we need to make relates to the overall character of the area. And in this area, we do have several buildings that are closer to the setback lines, and it's more of a mix. So I think that variance particularly is supportable. And in addition to that, I think the parking variance is something we can support. Clearly, the long-range plan for that area envisions concentrating parking in areas like this, and because it is entirely enclosed and underground, it shouldn't have a big impact on the surrounding properties. So if there's no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Freeland.
Aye.
Slack.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Gilselman.
Aye.
Gagnon.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
8-0.
And that motion carries. Next, we have the site plan review. Commissioner Slack.
I move to approve staff recommendation for item F, site plan review for new mixed-use building, including the 8 conditions.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Bender.
Aye.
Gagnon.
Aye.
Gilselman.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Slack.
Aye.
8-0.
Okay, and that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 4. It was brought to my attention there's one other item that was left off of our committee of the whole consent agenda. That is the location and design review for the Target Center renovation project. On January 14th, we found that that project is consistent with the comprehensive plan. May I have a motion to that effect? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. And that concludes our business for today. We have Committee of the Whole on Thursday. Our next meeting is February 8th.
We have a retreat.